This lecture is a list of books and films that atheists might be interested in, with commentary. And next month's lecture topic will be an atheist perspective on the Crusades. References and more book titles will be found throughout and at the end of the individual written lectures, Atheist Aesthetics, at AtheistScholar.org in their respective bibliographies. There is not an atheist aesthetic, and many non-believers who love the arts think that this is a very good thing. Atheists are thinkers who refuse to be confined to any dogmatism, including artistic theory that is doctrinaire. Art flourishes best in times when philosophic thinking is speculative, when religious strictures are questioned, and when economic conditions are secure. Such optimum circumstances were the state of affairs in 5th century Greece, Renaissance Florence, the Tang Dynasty in China, England in the century after the Armada, and 17th century Holland. In the present day, there are many great writers, architects, artists, film directors, composers, dancers, and children's book authors who are atheists. Their works do not need to display an outspoken atheism. Many free-thinking, creative artists exhibit their doubt in other, subtler ways. Their rebellion or indifference is displayed in myriad styles, such as subverting the rules of the genre they are working in. Other strategies employed may be depicting how some of the characters have been made unhappy or have been ruined by moralistic hypocrites, religious believers, and/or outworn and nonsensical cultural practices. Literary authors and playwrights may depict charismatic characters who express doubt and free thought in a convincing and attractive manner. Music may adopt a broad base that refuses to be confined to one style, as in the present day, when classical music blends with jazz, country with folk, and much musical style is informed by world music. Rap, metal, and other styles express discontent with societal values, and there is a great deal of music with irreligious lyrics that listeners can hear in a variety of venues, including the internet. Inner emotions may be expressed by an artist such as Mark Rothko, who is devoted to color, form, and space. Rothko attempted to transcend the political and cultural symbols of his time. The sculptures of Giacometti, very small, very slender men, are a commentary on the meaninglessness of contemporary life. Each man appears nearly vanished, angst-ridden, and with an attenuated sense of self. Architects such as Frank Gehry have broken free of the rigidity of the international style. Their buildings exhibit sweeping roofs, exaggerated curves, and exude a sense of naturalness. Modern dance has rejected many of the rigid rules of classical ballet and focuses on inner expression, which includes doubt and rebellion. There is a crossover of styles in the dance arts as well as of music. Writers, playwrights, and poets have experimented with fracturing narrative, time, and space in their work, attempting to spur their readers and viewers to make an effort to understand writing through effort, rather than being spoon-fed by cultural bias. Joyce's Ulysses, 1922, is a classic example of a godless work. Such techniques can cause readers and viewers to question certain cultural assumptions, including religious belief. In Serious Art, 1991, John Passmore writes about 3 distinct artistic genres. There is art for entertainment alone, and there is telic art that has a purpose, whether political, religious, or social, and tries to send a message through the artwork that will convince or educate the reader or viewer. Then there is the highest form of art, serious art, that Passmore maintains tries to be independent of the other 2 strands. He admits that there is often not a clear distinction between such divisions. The religious painting or poem may come to express secular values, for instance. The official building, meant to glorify a state dictatorship, may become a hymn to the secular spirit of man. Comedy, such as Charlie Chaplin's Little Tramp films, may subvert the admiration audiences feel for the powerful and reinforce humanist values. Dictatorships and theocratic tyrannies frequently value both entertainment art and telic art. They are fond of the first because it provides what they hope is distraction from the reality of the citizen's plight, and they reward telic art when it reinforces the assumptions of their regime. Bertolt Brecht, the atheist communist playwright, is an excellent example of the author rising above his political alignment with the Communist Party to write some of the best serious plays of the 20th century. Brecht ostensibly followed the party line in his dramas, but the party leaders were always uneasy and suspicious of him because of his unorthodox thinking. Brecht's work is an exemplar of the drifting of the three artistic divisions into one another. What play lover can forget Brecht's superb Mother Courage, 1939? There is no doubt that Brecht's play has moved from entertainment and didactic purpose to serious or high art. In fact, Mother Courage becomes all three categories, transcending the purpose of its creator and what the dogmatic politicians demanded of it. Iris Murdoch, the novelist philosopher, said that art was a great hall of reflection where we can all meet and everything under the sun can be examined and considered. For this reason, it is attacked and feared by dictators and by authoritarian moralists. Plato, St. Augustine, the Catholic Church, the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, and Islam are just a few of the authoritarian thinkers and regimes who have either tried to control the arts or banish them altogether. The Catholic Church was the most successful in its attempts to control art, as it was the primary patron during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Nazi Germany is a horrible example of a dictatorship attempting to force art to the telic purpose of glorifying its mythology and philosophy. The Soviet Union is another. After a brief flowering of abstraction and modernism, the Soviet regime closed down the creativity and demanded the arts glorify the goals of its party. The result in both cases was that their official art became banal and hackneyed. When art begins to serve religion or the state, it contributes to the ossification of the regime it purports to serve. A meaningful and serious art is greatly valued by freethinkers who hold culture dear. Art criticism is appreciated by art lovers for the enhancement it provides for the understanding and complexity of the arts. But it too may ossify and attempt to fit creativity into a Procrustean bed. Frederick Crewe states that the three most influential critical approaches of the last century, Freudianism, Marxism, and deconstruction, combined comprehensive understanding of art and the human condition. Atheists will be interested in the fact that all three were atheist-oriented critiques, although some of deconstruction's anti-realist approaches left a small opening for religion. Crewe states, Freudianism provides an explanatory apparatus for individual identity and family relations, Marxism for social history, and deconstruction for the cosmic nature of things. Together they cover the whole field of human experience, and each also promises to provide a key to deep forces that have been repressed and disguised for the sake of psychic economy, class interest, or rational order. The three styles of criticism gradually became stale and rigid, and with the arrival of new thinking and new critics, passed into a twilight of irrelevance. The arts, however, did not become extraneous, but continued to engross, educate, and fascinate their enthusiasts. Among those enthusiasts are a considerable share of atheists and freethinkers who find their values and independence mirrored in many books, stage productions, poetry, film, and painting. Now, a new critical theory has come along which shares many of the flaws of a similar formulation in the field of psychology. See Atheist Psychology, Evolutionary Psychology. A few of the best-known critical theorists are Joseph Carroll in literature and Ellen Dissanayake and Dennis Dutton in art. The theory of evolutionary art in general maintains that the arts are grounded in a universal human nature and that it is an evolutionary account, a Darwinian aesthetics, that can explain the origins and significance of the arts. Each previous school of criticism has made the claim of being able to explain art's origins and importance to people. Yet, the criteria and evaluating methods for what makes art serious has remained very much the same with each reigning school. Most non-believers embrace Darwinian evolutionary theory. But it is important to understand the distinction between genuine evolutionary science and the low-salient social evolutionary theories that have sprung up in the social sciences and the humanities. Evolutionary art critics maintain that our taste emerged in the Pleistocene era 1.8 million to 10,000 years ago. They believe arts speak to a universal human nature. These critics differ from the opinions of other scientists who believe art is a byproduct of our very complex brains and should be excluded from the list of adaptations of natural selection. Dennis Dutton, in his well-reviewed volume, The Art Instinct, 2008, claims that art has two very important functions. One function is that art is a low-cost, low-risk surrogate experience. We can encounter different environments vicariously and navigate them. This is a sensible idea. But the second and most important aspect of the arts is that displaying skill in them, he believes, shows that the person possessing the ability is excellent mate potential. Dutton claims that one of the most important reasons we become angry when we discover that we were fooled by a technically perfect copy of an original artwork is that the forger is pretending to be an original artist and excellent mate. He believes our tastes have not evolved significantly since Stone Age times when artistic abilities were valued for their mating promise. What pleases us today, he says, the proponents of evolutionary art maintain, does so because it had an adaptive survival value in the Pleistocene Stone Age. We know very little about our Pleistocene ancestors, what they were like, how they lived, what sort of societies they had, and what their mating habits might have been. Any hypothesis about the kinds of strategies they had to help them reproduce and then allowed their characteristics to move through the gene pool and survive today is highly speculative, according to Anthony Gottlieb. Gottlieb believes Darwin would have been skeptical. Furthermore, a layer of intermediate steps should be manifest when such a theory is examined, similar to the steps of the development of the eye in human evolutionary biology. There does not seem to be proof or evidence of such intermediate steps to prove the evolutionary explanation of the arts. What proof is available for inspection? There is very little. Gottlieb's final point is very telling. In the 1990s, when evolutionary social theories became popular, evolution was reckoned to be an extremely slow process. It is now believed to be faster than thought in the 90s, and the wiring of our minds may be continuing to develop. Evolutionary art theory needs to move on from its attempts to find, as E.O. Wilson and other scientists hope, consilience between the arts and science. It also needs to find a more complex focus than its rather monotonous fixation with the extension of Stone Age mentality surviving in modern works of art. Most disturbing to many atheist art enthusiasts is Dutton's attack on modern art. Modernism came at a time in history when there was an explosion in the arts. With that explosion came the abandonment of many cliches, including theistic ideas that were outworn and banal. Dutton criticizes such artifacts as the upside-down urinal of Dada. But are not strategies such as Dada's the way art cliches are questioned by criticism, by parody, and by creating new forms that challenge the old? Is not questioning of power structures, religion, cultural sacred cows, and hardened tradition a good thing? Many of Dada's artists were atheists and freethinkers. Objections to modernism from some art theory critics were parochial in the past and are no less so now. Books such as Peter Gay's Modernism, The Lure of Heresy, 2008, and John Passmore's Serious Art are subtle and sophisticated when considering aesthetic theory. Iris Murdoch states, "A free art is an essential aspect of a free society, as a degraded, lying art is a function of a tyrannical age." John Passmore makes the observation that there is probably no society from which art is totally absent. One cannot help assuming that it is important to us in many more ways than can be encompassed by our current knowledge. Passmore cautions that we do well in principle to be suspicious of such words as universal. There are many theistic or authoritarian assumptions barely concealed in such words. Making slaves of people was once considered human nature, as was the oppression of woman. There comes with such universal assumptions a sense that nothing can be done about wrongs, that because they belong to human nature, they are permanent. Many people who now profess to find religion adaptive seem to be saying in a surreptitious manner that nothing can be done to rid ourselves of it. There are so many non-adaptive aspects to religion that one wonders why such theories are given serious consideration. It is important to cherish and nourish free thinking in the arts as well as in science. We have not banished slavery, but we have made it unacceptable. We have not stopped the oppression of women, but we now view it as unconscionable. Slowly, we are making changes for the better in the world. We have not done away with religion, and it is very rich and powerful. But there are now nearly 20% of people in the United States that list none as their religious affiliation. Those numbers are higher in Western Europe. The arts must be allowed freedom to flourish, whether they spring from artists' embrace of Buddhism, Jungianism, atheism, or any other philosophy. Our practices cannot be confined to narrow views that seek to denigrate certain artistic and literary styles at the expense of other equally expressive approaches. This portion of the lecture concludes with a quote from John Passmore that many atheists will find salient and inspiring. He states, "Comte was right when he said that art can weaken fixed moral convictions. The real point at issue is whether this is necessarily a bad thing. Art is frequently opposed to conventional Christian morals. We are going to maintain that nevertheless such art can be morally educative, on courage, human affection, sympathetic understanding, freedom, generosity, tolerance, in opposition to bigotry, fanaticism, suspicion, avarice, jealousy, hypocrisy, and malice." Atheists will agree with Passmore's intelligent observation on the utility and delight of the arts for humans. Art will continue to resist theories that attempt to confine it to narrow definitions, and more gravely, will defy dictators, religion, false morality, and limited cultural practices. It will continue to astound, amaze, infuriate, and sustain us while we undertake the complicated task of being human. Books for parents and children. Secular American parents in the present day have an extra challenge when they raise children. American culture is a steeped in religion anomaly in the Western world. Many parents more in tune with the culture of our country do not concern themselves with raising children to be free thinkers, with open minds and the ability to question and make intelligent decisions. Certain religions encourage both parents and children to move in lockstep, not questioning cultural prescriptives. Secular parents are committed to raising children with open minds. In addition, atheist parents must make certain practical decisions, such as what to do about Christmas and Easter. Will your family celebrate these Christian holidays or not? How does a secular parent deal with Santa Claus? What do you answer when your teenager is invited to go to an after-school teen club that is Christian in orientation? It is vitally important for atheist parents to provide a secure, happy, and confident environment for their children. A dour atheism that reacts too negatively and emotionally to any mention of belief or religion might have an unintended effect on children, either by making them feel they must hide their thoughts concerning religious matters, or by causing them to feel rebellious and contrarian against secularism. One of the most important skills we can impart to our kids is the ability to think critically. Along with critical thinking, healthy, inquiring skepticism is a necessity for the secular child. Atheist parents can create an atmosphere that allows all topics, including belief systems, to be open to discussion. Parents can encourage curiosity, wonder about the natural world, experimentation according to the scientific method, and finding naturalistic explanations for things. Children's books are another important facet of many young people's lives. Books can help provide an open, alternative view to the fearful, obstructionist thinking of religion. Atheist Scholar has picked volumes helpful to parents trying to navigate the ambiguous cultural world of a society that sends astronauts to the moon and builds a creationist museum and Noah's Ark theme park in Kentucky. There are moments when secular parents feel that they need guidance more than their children do. The books listed in the lecture prioritize the secular outlook. The 2 volumes listed for parents contain invaluable references. All the books recommended on the book list have been read through by the Atheist Scholar. There is not a complete bibliography on the market for atheist or secular children's books. An ambitious atheist who is majoring in English, library science, or education might consider such a bibliography as a project. For every book we publish, Christians put out at least 10. But all the same, there are many more books for our children than there were 10 or 15 years ago. Let us hope the future holds more books, films, and atheist centers for the atheist child. Children do not like to feel alone. Books can open a vista that prioritizes secular and critical free thought. The following books on the list have been chosen for their merit by critics and readers. For parents, Dale McGowan, Parenting Beyond Belief, on raising ethical, caring kids without religion. Dale McGowan's book is an excellent help for people trying to bring up children in secular homes. It deals with secular topics in an open and even manner. Atheists vary in the degree of their unbelief, so some of the suggestions in the volume may not suit every parent, but there are enough resources listed in Parenting to put it on the must-have list. Parenting is important because of its excellent resource guides at the end of the chapters. Dale McGowan et al., Raising Freethinkers, a practical guide for parenting beyond belief. Before Parenting Beyond Belief and Raising Freethinkers, there were no practical resource volumes for helping secular parents raise confident and well-adjusted freethinkers. Secular parents now have a well-researched, greatly expanded guide with the publication of Freethinkers. Raising Freethinkers is a resource treasure of suggested ideas, books, films, websites, and free-thinking groups around the country. Children's books, and I have read every one of them. Dan Barker, Maybe Yes, Maybe No, a guide for young skeptics. Dan Barker's book, Maybe Yes, Maybe No, is an excellent short volume for teaching children critical thinking, skeptical thinking, and how to employ the scientific method in their lives. The book begins with a young girl who is a skeptic. The heroine questions 2 friends who believe they saw and heard ghosts in their house. She asks a series of questions that demonstrate their perceptions were incorrect. Barker breaks into the text at this point with how to deal with the claims that religion makes about miracles, angels, and so on. Barker then segues into a detailed discussion of the scientific method and the particular practices that it entails. Christopher Brockman, What About Gods? Chris Brockman does not mince words. He tells the young reader that gods are made up by people. He has no respect for religion and states clearly that religion is a remnant of our early history. At that time, people explained things they could not understand by means of religion. Religion was also a concept that helped control people. Brockman reinforces the idea that not everyone believes in God. The book makes it plain that there is nothing wrong with rejecting other people's ideas, especially about God. Richard Dawkins, The Magic of Reality, How We Know What's Really True. Richard Dawkins, the well-known atheist and evolutionary biologist, has performed a much-needed and welcome service for the secular community. The author separates magic into 3 categories: supernatural, stage magic, differentiating between legitimate entertainers and charlatans, and poetic magic, the wonder and beauty we feel with the encounter and understanding of reality. The book carefully explains that while much reality is visibly observable, some things can't be seen except by experiment and inference. Magic is divided into 12 chapters. What is reality? What is magic? Who is the first person? Why are there so many different kinds of animals? What are things made of? Most of the chapters begin with one of the above questions and a relation of the myths and folktales with which people used to explain natural phenomena. Then Dawkins provides the scientific explanation. Jennifer Glossop, The Kid's Book of World Religions. World Religions is an informative volume with 12 important religions explained, along with some minor belief systems such as Macumba from Brazil. What is particularly heartening for atheists is that the book provides a brief section which states that there are millions of people in the world who do not believe in God. The text defines atheist and agnostic stances. It mentions that Confucianism is more a philosophy of this world conduct rather than a belief religion, and that many Buddhists and Jains do not believe in a God. The book contains an excellent index and a nice glossary. S.J. Hitchcock and Tom Flynn, Disbelief 101, A Young Person's Guide to Atheism. S.J. Hitchcock's volume asks the reader to have a pretend dialogue with someone, but instead of using the word God in sentences, to substitute the invisible flying clown. The effect is very amusing. Hitchcock's dialogue is sharp and funny. He deftly destroys the standard arguments for God. He effectively argues against creationism and intelligent design and maintains that religion and science are incompatible. Hitchcock holds that science is superior because it is based on facts and evidence. He is very critical of all religion, but especially of Christianity and Islam. Disbelief 101 helps do away with one of religion's standard fallback arguments, that it is necessary for morality and meaning. There is a brief but respectable bibliography for young people interested in further reading and a good index. Jennifer Morgan, Born with a Bang, Book 1, The Universe Tells Our Cosmic Story. Bright children from about 6 years old might find this book interesting. This is a mildly controversial book. The volume has passed expert scientific critiques and is considered sound concerning the facts it presents. The trouble for some readers is the text. The universe tells its own story, and some parents have complained that such a narrative device confused their children. Others have said the kids loved it and understood it perfectly. Some readers have found it somewhat New Age or pantheistic. The science is correct, however, and the book provides an arresting story of the wonderful and awe-inspiring beginning of the universe. Morgan's book has a nice glossary, excellent timeline sections, and a large page of resources at the end. Books for kids, books for adults, videos, and websites in the field of cosmology. Lisa Westberg Peters, Our Family Tree, An Evolution Story. Our Family Tree was well researched by Peters. The book begins with the story of the human species when life was tiny round cells, but with the same kind of spiraling genetic code for life we have today. It ends with the observation that we humans have large brains that wonder who we are, where we came from, and where we're going next. The final line states that our human family goes a long way back. Both authors and illustrators' notes provide excellent resources. Philip Pullman, his Dark Materials trilogy, The Golden Compass, 1995, The Subtle Knife, 1997, and The Amber Spyglass, 2000. Ages early teens on up. This review contains some spoilers. Philip Pullman is an outspoken atheist, and his trilogy is a welcome alternative to theist-oriented stories such as Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. It has won many literary prizes, including the coveted Whitbread for The Amber Spyglass. Pullman has created a strong-minded young girl, Lyra, for his heroine. Her daemon, Pan, an animal familiar who is always with her, is a charming addition. Her male sidekick and love interest, Will, joins her in the second volume, and a great deal of that book is given to Will's adventures. Lyra must find her destiny, and the mystery of the dust must be solved. The first volume is the most interesting for atheists. It takes place in an alternative world that looks like ours, but is a religious theocracy. It is an interesting take on what it might be like to live in a theocracy. Needless to say, the church is full of villainous schemers and hypocrites who threaten Lyra, Will, and the souls of little children on whom they experiment. The entire fantasy adventure narrative takes place in a multiverse of parallel worlds. Lyra and Will are the new Adam and Eve who come together to create a new dispensation free from superstition, for the entire multiverse. Atheist fiction. What does literature mean for the atheist who reads novels, plays, poetry, and essays? For many of us, literature is the only transcendent value because it is open-ended. The great literature to which we return again and again provides a deep and exhaustive observation of the human experience. Each author, even when plumbing the depths of the human puzzle, the human problem, will approach it in an equally profound and different manner. Each author will present a different interpretation. The various strategies that writers have employed to approach the problem of God's non-existence can be observed in the volumes chosen for the book list. Each volume will deal with the difficulty of living without a transcendent other, and consequently without a given dispensation. Humans must create their own meaning in an indifferent universe, and many secular readers believe that literature helps them with that task. The great writers have seen the eternal dilemmas and challenges of life so incontrovertibly and written of them with such clarity and passion that even far-reaching changes in human customs and practices through the centuries cannot obscure their meaning for people. Serious literature is not for entertainment, although it might entertain us, nor is it to convince us of some religious or political creed, although it might serve to change our minds about something we believe. Serious literature is open, searching, diverse, and free from the tenets and bondage of religion, politics, false societal values, and received opinion. Literature not only grants readers the ability to traverse nations and continents, but the entire universe. It can delve deeply into the human psyche as well, permitting its readers to penetrate the minds and motives of other people. Serious literature continually tests itself, its philosophy, and its characters. Our belief or unbelief, love or self-sacrifice, the answers to the difficulty of our human condition? If the serious artist thinks she has found any of the answers to the problem of life, she will test that solution to the extreme. She will have the protagonist fail to employ the answers correctly, or ignore them and decide to take an opposite path. She will present characters who challenge her conclusions. She will create ambiguity so that the reader will be hard-pressed to discover what a correct course of conduct might entail. Serious literature is not content with shallow cliches, easy answers, and restrictive boundaries. Some contemporary atheist authors, such as Ian McEwan and Martin Amis, are very interested in the creation of a new meta-narrative for contemporary times. No writer has attempted it as yet. Both writers have a sense that evolution, the true story of the human race, needs a secular poetry to express its grandeur, beauty, and terror. They believe we need a new Milton who will weave the facts of evolution into a new account that will be a gripping epic. Such authors think that the scientific description of evolution, although written elegantly, is not sufficient for people, that humans respond to storytelling's magic more than to scientific precision. They maintain that a spellbinding story about evolution can achieve a secular transcendence. The artists in the book list below are atheists or agnostics who have adopted a variety of strategies with which to express their doubt. Each of the volumes below is written in a different style and has a different way of exploring the non-truth and ineffectuality of religion and the belief in God. Some of the approaches are subtle, such as Emily Dickinson's dictum to tell the truth but tell it slant. Some are blunt and emphatic, such as Nietzsche's ringing cry that God is dead. Most often, irreligious writers will mingle several strands of criticism in their narrative. They will frequently combine their critique of religion with negative depictions of bureaucracy, politics, and social values. Very often, the non-believing author will create an entire narrative world with little, if any, mention of God. Marcel Proust's great work, In Search of Lost Time, has recreated the secular world of Belle Epoque France in all 6 volumes. His magnum opus is frequently described as a godless world. Joseph Heller's novel, Catch-22, does not get around to the question of God and belief until about page 189. He creates a satiric dialogue between his anti-hero and an officer's wife at a party who argue about the nature of the God neither one believes in. The lecture will explore the various techniques the secular writers have adopted in the book list. Many atheist readers believe literature written by great irreligious authors show an extraordinary ability to elucidate the numinous without conceding anything to the supernatural. That is a quote from Christopher Hitchens' God is Not Great, page 286. Hitchens was speaking specifically about Ian McEwan, whose work he admired, but he might just as well have said the same about any timeless atheist writer. This portion of the lecture closes with an admirable quote from Salman Rushdie, an atheist who depicts the quarrel over God as ongoing and never-ending. Readers will remember that since the publication of his satanic verses in 1988, Rushdie has been in peril of his life because of a fatwa issued by the Islamic Ayatollah Khomeini the following year. The fatwa was later lifted and the danger has somewhat receded. His words give the lie to the dogmatic and rigid thinking demanded by religion. One can breathe the air of freedom and find space to think one's own thoughts when reading his tribute to literature. Rushdie believes fiction is, quote, less the soapbox for dogma or polemic than a utopian place of disputation where everything could be said to everyone by anyone on any subject, including the non-existence of God and the abolition of kings. That is from his Enchantress of Florence, pages 35 to 36. The books on the following list have been chosen for their merit by critics and readers, and I have read every one of them. The discussions of the volumes below contain spoilers. Of the four existentialist authors, Camus, de Beauvoir, Nietzsche, and Sartre, I have included only Nietzsche for this portion of the lecture due to the limits of time. For a more extended discussion of existentialism and the four writers listed, see Existentialism, Atheist Philosophies, at AtheistScholar.org. All four of the authors mentioned were atheists who believed that people are responsible for creating their own meaning in the face of an empty universe devoid of God. They believed that joy would come with the realization that the individual has taken the necessary steps to face life with courage and exaltation. Man stands alone, but each decision he makes is the first step on a new path. He stands with his head upright, his feet solidly on the earth. He is not a supplicant, but has emerged as an authentic and creative being. I urge my listeners to read each one of those authors. Samuel Beckett, 1952 to 1953, Waiting for Godot, a tragic comedy in 2 acts. Samuel Beckett's play is often interpreted in a variety of ways. Two tramps that have seen better days, named Vladimir and Estragon, are waiting by a tree on a road. They have been waiting for the mysterious Godot for a long time. They expect Godot to explain the point of their lives, to give some meaning to existence. In the first act, Estragon asks Vladimir what he will ask of Godot, which is G-O-D-O-T. Vladimir, oh, nothing very definite. Estragon, a kind of prayer. Vladimir, precisely. Estragon, a vague supplication. Vladimir, exactly. The audience knows that Estragon and Vladimir will go on waiting indefinitely. That God is absent from the world, is non-existent. To wait for him to invest life with meaning is indeed, as the title states, tragicomic. Emily Dickinson, 1830 to 1886. Helen Vendler, Dickinson, Selected Poems and Commentaries. Vendler's edition of Dickinson has been chosen for its merits. Vendler is one of the most eminent poetry critics of this age and one of the most attentive readers of poetry as well. She has read Dickinson carefully over the years and makes the convincing case that the Belle of Amherst was ill-served by her family and editor friend when the first edition of her poems was published in 1890. They apparently attempted to pretty the poems up, which undermined Dickinson's intent. According to Vendler, the poet was a non-believer. Emily Dickinson was a recluse who never went to church and refused to accept Jesus as her Savior in the only year of college which she attended. In a letter, she speaks of her family praying in the morning to an eclipse that they called Father. There are 150 poems in this edition, brilliantly elucidated by Helen Vendler. Dickinson is one of our finest American poets, and these poems are her best. Vendler states, all of Dickinson's poems that resort to Christian imagery and language rework Christianity in some way, intellectually, blasphemously, or comically. Joseph Heller, 1961, Catch-22. Heller's novel is a dark, hilarious satire about an American combat unit in Pianosa, Italy during the end of World War II, around 1944. The novel's anti-hero, Yossarian, finds that the army bureaucracy, which is a microcosm of society, has invented a Catch-22. Since Catch-22 does not officially exist, no one can rescind it, change it, or overthrow it. Critics have pointed out how much Catch-22 resembles God and religion. God does not exist either, but nobody can get rid of the concept. God is absent from the novel except in the person of the ineffectual chaplain. On about page 189, Yossarian and an officer's wife argue about the traits of the God they don't believe in. It is a hilarious, satiric exchange pointing to the fact that there are emotional remnants of God belief in both characters. The dialogue is a mere 2 pages in length, but it is very significant. The officer's wife disbelieves in a just God, a good God. Yossarian disbelieves in a wicked God who is responsible for tooth decay and making old people lose control of their bowels. Critics have been quick to point out how much God is like Catch-22. As with Catch-22, God could be a myth, invented, and then enforced by people because they believe in it. The argument between Yossarian and the officer's wife suggests that this is likely the case about God. No one believes in God or in Catch-22, but all the same, the rules are enforced. The satirical dialogue is very amusing, but also sharply thought-provoking. Heller's plot device is excellent. It creates doubt by invoking laughter. Ernest Hemingway, 1929, A Farewell to Arms. Frederick Henry, an American who was an ambulance driver in the Italian army in World War I, is an exemplary Hemingway hero. Hemingway was an atheist, and on page 8 of A Farewell to Arms, an Italian officer states, all thinking men are atheists. Hemingway believed that the universe was empty and meaningless, and that the way a person faced that nothingness was the definition of a worthy human being. He maintained that one had to face life with courage and grace. Henry is wounded and while in the hospital falls in love with one of the nurses, Catherine. At first they play at love, but their affair turns serious and Catherine becomes pregnant. Henry, disgusted by war and treachery, deserts, and he and Catherine go off to Switzerland. They have some months of peace, but she has a horrible labor, and both she and the baby die. There is almost no hope in Farewell to Arms. Hemingway states his pessimism in perhaps the most quoted lines in American literature. If a person brings so much courage into the world that the world must kill him to break him, so of course it kills him. The world breaks everyone, and afterwards many are strong at the broken places, but those it cannot break, it will kill. It kills the very good, the very gentle, and the very brave impartially. If you are none of these things, the world will kill you too, but there will be no special hurry. Hemingway believed that the only salvation for people in this dangerous and indifferent world was to maintain grace under pressure, even when facing inevitable defeat. Hemingway's world is one without God, and the Hemingway hero must find the strength to go on alone, as Frederick does at the end of the novel. He leaves the hospital and walks alone in the rain, without Catherine, without faith, but with fortitude and courage. Franz Kafka, 1926, The Castle. The Castle is a surreal, dark vision of a book. A surveyor known only as K arrives in a village apparently hired by the authorities in the castle above the town. The entire plot of the novel, which Kafka never finished, concerns K's struggle to gain access to the castle, which he never succeeds in effecting. K's attempts to reach the castle or make a human connection in the village fail. Kafka's stated intent was to complete the novel with K's death. On the day K dies, the castle sends him a message that K can live and work in the village, but his legal claim to live there is denied. Kafka, at one point in his life, called himself an atheist socialist. The most modern readings of K as a man trapped in language also suggest the non-appearance or non-existence of God. The early K is trapped in many things, including language and bureaucracy, but especially by his yearning to achieve some correspondence with a deity who is not in the castle nor anywhere else. The indifference of God or other forces to man's condition is front and center in the castle. K's acceptance of such a state of affairs condemns him to wait for a non-existent answer, a non-existent salvation, until he dies. Ian McEwan, Saturday, 2005. Ian McEwan embraces the new atheism, see atheist activism, and he is also a believer in the power of fiction to achieve a secular transcendence. He tests this theory of his frequently in his work. And Saturday, he sets up a situation that queries literature's importance to people in our contemporary scientific society. Henry Perron is a successful and happily married neurosurgeon. His other family members are all successive and creative, and they are non-believers. The characters discuss the need of creating a story for evolution, and that evolution's Milton has yet to arrive. Henry has a minor auto accident with a young man, Baxter, who has Huntington's disease, a degenerative brain disorder. Henry recognizes the illness and they discuss it. Baxter feels slighted concerning the accident and begins to stalk Henry. Baxter and a friend show up at Henry's house during a family reunion, and the afflicted young man pulls out a knife. He orders Henry's daughter to take off her clothes and to read him some of her poetry. Instead, she reads Arnold's Dover Beach, a beautiful poem of non-belief. Baxter is transformed by her poetry and orders her to dress. He still menaces Henry, but the son of the family throws Baxter down the stairs. Henry operates to save the young man. The large question on Saturday is whether Baxter reached a secular transcendence with the reading of Dover Beach. Both poets, the grandfather and the daughter, believe that Baxter's behavior confirmed the ecstasy he felt hearing the poetry. Henry disagrees. He thinks Baxter was merely experiencing mood swings, as the Huntington's disease is wasting away Baxter's temporal and frontal lobes. Is he correct? Or do the arts have a transformative power and ability to affect secular transcendence and infuse life with meaning? Atheists who love the arts and receive sustenance from them will answer yes. Friedrich Nietzsche, 1883 to 1885. Thus spake Zarathustra, a book for none and all. Zarathustra was written after Nietzsche's Gay Science. The book is a long narrative somewhat resembling an epic poem rather than an essay or novel. Zarathustra is a prophet who comes to speak to mankind from his seclusion of many years. Readers of Nietzsche will recognize the familiar themes that were to preoccupy him, such as the overman, the God is dead theme, and the concept of eternal recurrence. Eternal recurrence is the concept that life happens over and over the same way for eternity. If one has the same life to repeat until the end of time, one should live so well as to have no regrets. That is the task for the overman. Ayn Rand, Anthem. The late Ayn Rand continues to be remembered as the founder of objectivism, see Atheist philosophy, objectivism, as well as being a famous novelist and atheist. Anthem is a short, early work of hers, but it is very representative of Rand's philosophic stance. Anthem opens with a young man living in a dystopian collective society where the word I is forbidden. The citizens of this futuristic community use the word we for their collective consciousness. The hero of the story is more intelligent and better looking than many of his fellow citizens, and his superiority is looked on with disapproval by the authorities. The word I is such an anathema in this world that those who use it are punished. The young man named Equality 7-2521 witnesses a public burning of a blasphemer who uses the word I. Equality links eyes with the man while the flames gather around him, and Equality becomes convinced that he is the murdered man's disciple. After finding materials in his secret tunnel, Equality is able to put together a light bulb. He is eager and anxious to show his discovery to the World Council of Scholars, which is meeting in his town that year. When he presents his light bulb to the council, they are furious and threaten to kill him and destroy his light bulb. Equality cannot accept the destruction of his invention, so he escapes and runs to the uncharted forest. He and his lover travel until they find a house from the old, unmentionable times. Equality finds a library there and immerses himself in it. He learns the meaning of the word I, renames himself from atheist, and makes plans to father a new race of individualistic men. Although Rand is speaking out against the idea of a collective society, she very consciously models equality's community in the same terms that would be used to describe a religious theocracy, possibly from the Middle Ages in Europe. The title Anthem itself has religious resonance. The ignorance and spitefulness of the leaders of the collective seem very much in line with the historically recorded behavior of the church's religious hierarchy. The public burning of the man who uses the blasphemous word I is surely taken right from the practice of the numerous auto-da-fés, or acts of faith, which were the executions by fire of heretics during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance in Europe. Equality, now Prometheus, the bringer of fire to man in ancient Greek mythology, ruminates on how men were first enslaved by gods, then kings, then class. From his reading, he has discovered that man has rights no king, God, or other men can take away. Atheist films. The film discussions below contain many spoilers, including plot resolution, and once again, I have seen each one of these films. The films of a nation reflect its mentality in a more direct way than other artistic media. This is a quote from Sigrid Krakauer, From Caligari to Hitler, A Psychological History of the German Film. The films of a nation surely reflect on its mentality, and United States cinema all too often exhibits its theist bent in its films. The religiosity is overt in some cases, such as Chariots of Fire from 1981, and other films in which prayer is exhibited, characters are seen going to or coming from church, mentions are made of the Bible, and so on. The theistic proclivity of America is often portrayed in a more subtle and impressionistic manner as well. The viewer understands that the rustling of leaves of the trees or the wind blowing over the grass or water signals the presence or the attention of a creator God. Terrence Malick employs such devices to perfection in his recent Tree of Life, 2011. In Napoleon Dynamite, 2004, a popular cult film, a character who's been elected class president looks thankfully up at the sky. The audience knows he is thanking God for his election. Films are an expensive business. To write a novel, poem, play, musical composition, or choreograph a dance piece, all one needs initially is a pen and paper or a computer. Paintings and prints need a computer or paper, paints, and pencils, and some equipment. A film needs producers, investors, a director, a complex film crew, and highly sophisticated technology. Although there are many exceptions for independent films, the average cost of a film in the present day is $65 to $100 million. The returns must be commensurate with the expense. In a country given over to religious superstition, the easy path to the most money can sometimes be to make an overtly religious film, such as The Passion of the Christ from 2004. Another ploy is to film a secular subject with theist connotations built in, a sort of nod to the religious convictions most Americans share. Hector Avalos, a biblical scholar who has called for the end to traditional biblical studies, partially blames the print and film media for perpetuating the idea that theism and the Bible have relevance for contemporary society. Avalos states that the media portray the Bible and its characters in the best light possible. He goes on to say that many Hollywood films promote a certain vision of Christian theology. Films with an agnostic, doubting, or atheist slant, however, continue to be made. There is definitely an audience for them. Almost 20% of the American public answers non-affiliated to surveys asking what church they attend. See atheist demographics. Films critical of various aspects of religion have one important advantage. When they are made, they are most frequently of superior quality and worth viewing many times. The movie list below discusses 6 films considered timeless, and at AtheistScholar.org, Atheist Aesthetics, there is a general list of films with a secular viewpoint that are considered of exceptional quality. Films with a secular agnostic viewpoint, infrequent as they are generally welcomed by the secular community. We are fortunate that most of the films on the film list are available on DVD. Atheist films are the more appreciated by the secular community because they are so few. Because secular film is very often a collaboration between like-minded individuals and a special project of the director, the quality is usually quite high, as I mentioned. The message, whether anti-clerical, non-theist, or simply godless, is delivered forcefully with all the art available to the production crew. No serious study of the non-theist film has yet been published. Such a project would be an excellent theme for a dissertation or a book for the aspiring graduate student. It is a truism among cinema lovers and critics that many films end with a resolution of conflicts that are not so easily reconciled in life. Such endings may give viewers, including atheists, the energy to not simply leave the theater content with a filmic resolution, but with a strong desire to remedy the conflicts and further the atheist cause in the real world. The following films have been chosen for their merit by critics and viewers. Crimes and Misdemeanors. Director Woody Allen, 1989. Woody Allen's 1989 film interrogates as many varieties of belief and unbelief as Bergman's Seventh Seal. Wealthy, sophisticated people in contemporary Manhattan find themselves seeking answers and meaning as much as people did during the Middle Ages in Europe. There are 2 mingled plots in the film. In the first, Judah, a wealthy ophthalmologist, is threatened by his clandestine mistress, Dolores. She wants him to leave his wife. If he does not, she will reveal the affair and some of Judah's shady financial dealings to his wife. He has Dolores murdered. He is tormented by guilt for a long time, but eventually recovers, which leads to the question of whether he should have confessed or not. He is a guilty man. There are 2 opposite belief systems in the first portion of Crimes and Misdemeanors. A blind rabbi tells Judah that the world has moral structure, that it is invested with meaning and forgiveness, and that there is a higher power. Judah rejects this point of view. The second plot line is more comic. An unsuccessful documentary filmmaker, Cliff, is working on a film about a contemporary philosopher, Levi, whose worldview he admires. To raise money for the project, he agrees to make a complimentary documentary about his brother-in-law, Lester. Cliff makes a mocking documentary about Lester, who is an egotistical bore, and is fired. The philosopher Cliff was going to film commits suicide. The 2 plots mingle when Judah and Cliff meet at a wedding. Judah tells the story to Cliff as though it's an idea for a film. Cliff says the murderer should have confessed because in the absence of a God, he is forced to assume he has responsibility himself. Crimes and Misdemeanors is an interrogation of the meaning of life and morality without a God. But Allen's conclusions, brilliant as they may be, find no middle ground. Either the world is invested with meaning because of belief in God, or it's a cold, conscienceless place seen from the view of the non-believer. Woody Allen gives the film's last words to the dead philosopher, and they are worth quoting. Many secular viewers will find a simple but deep wisdom in them. It is only we, with our capacity to love, that give meaning to an indifferent universe. And yet, most human beings seem to have the ability to keep trying and find joy from simple things, from their family, their work, and from the hope that future generations might understand more. Elmer Gantry, director Richard Brooks, 1960. Elmer Gantry is about a fast-talking and hell-raising salesman who falls in love with a lady evangelist and joins her crusade. They become lovers. He preaches hellfire and damnation to frighten the crowd, and then she comes on and preaches redemption and salvation. Gantry becomes more hypocritical and publicity-seeking as time goes by. He invades a brothel with the news media in tow on a morals crusade for publicity. A former girlfriend of his, who became a prostitute after their affair, is in the brothel and is very angry with Gantry. She tries to blackmail him out of $25,000, but then changes her mind. Unfortunately for Gantry, the incriminating photos she has are eventually published in a newspaper, and his reputation is ruined. His former girlfriend has a change of heart and publicly clears Gantry's name. Gantry returns to the female evangelist on the opening night of their new tabernacle. During services, the tabernacle catches fire, but instead of fleeing, the young woman refuses to leave in time and dies there. He departs town, determined to leave the ministry and his formerly duplicitous ways. Gantry remains an interesting and revealing psychological portrait of a phony religious huckster. The film is very anti-clerical and replete with insight into Christian hawking of salvation for cash. Inherit the Wind, director Stanley Kramer, 1960. Inherit the Wind is an adaptation of an earlier stage play. Both dramas were based on the famous Scopes monkey trial of the 1920s. The film has been criticized for not being accurate, but those who have read the original transcripts of the trial maintain that there is a great deal of verbatim material from them in the movie. Cates, a stand-in for the original Scopes, is arrested for teaching evolution to his sophomore students in violation of Tennessee's Butler Act. There is a circus atmosphere in the small town as fundamentalist politician Brady arrives to argue for the prosecution. He is modeled on the famous William Jennings Bryan. The lawyer for the defense, Henry Drummond, comes to town almost unnoticed. He is a stand-in for the famous Clarence Darrow, who did argue for the defense in the Scopes trial. Hornbeck, the cynical newspaper columnist, also arrives in town. He is modeled on the famous H.L. Mencken, who covered the trial and heaped derision in print on Bryan. The courtroom scenes are high drama, with Spencer Tracy, Drummond, and Frederick March Brady verbally sparring. Drummond grills Brady on his knowledge of the Bible and his opinions concerning what Brady considers a holy book. Hornbeck, just as the real Mencken did, sends dispatches back to his newspaper that ridicule Brady in a very effective manner. The prosecution won, but the film makes clear that the Scope supporters won an important moral victory from the case. The theme of the movie is the defense of free speech versus those who would restrict it. The Scopes case was considered a moral victory for free speech. Life of Brian, director Terry Jones, 1979. Life of Brian was considered blasphemous when it was released, and many bans were placed on it in England. Nevertheless, it was a huge success in both Britain and the United States. It is frequently on critic and viewer lists of the greatest film comedies. A young man named Brian Cohen is born in the stable next to the one Jesus is born in on the same night. This coincidence confuses many people, particularly the three wise men. The comedy continues with the juxtaposition of Brian with Jesus throughout the entire film. It's a clever device to poke fun at the Jesus myth by substituting someone else for him, yet making the Brian story very similar to the biblical story in the New Testament. The word spreads that Brian is the Messiah, and the scenes of Brian trying to get rid of his followers are high comedy. His every word is considered doctrinal. He is arrested finally and brought before Pontius Pilate. Pilate ultimately agrees to release him, but a group of crucified people all claim to be Brian, and the wrong person is released. Brian is crucified, and everyone deserts him, including his mother and girlfriend. His fellow victims cheer him up with a rousing song, "Look on the bright side of life." Brian explores in a comic manner the viral nature of belief. The depiction of an ordinary man and his platitudinous sayings becoming an object of worship is fascinating to observe. The untruth flies from one person to the next until a mob embraces the entire myth. The Seventh Seal, director Ingmar Bergman, 1957. The Seventh Seal is a profound film set in the time of the Black Death in Europe. A knight Block is returning from the Crusades with his squire. The knight is tormented by the question of belief in God and has been for some time. The title of the film refers to the Book of Revelation's description of a silence in heaven when the seventh seal is broken, signaling the end of the world. The knight's squire is a courageous atheist. They journey through a landscape riddled with corpses of people killed by the plague. The knight encounters death and plays chess on the beach with the pale black-robed vision. Death agrees he will not take Block until the chess game is over. The knight and his squire resume their return journey to the knight's castle, and while on their way they encounter a small family of actors. The knight is charmed by their little family. Block and John acquire a few more people to accompany them to the castle. The actor Joss, however, sees Death playing chess with Block, which no one else can detect. The others believe the knight is playing chess by himself. Joss becomes frightened and determines to leave with his family. Block notices them leaving, and to distract Death, knocks over the chess pieces, giving the actor family time to escape. Death wins the game and announces that on his next appearance he will take Block and all those traveling with him. Block, John, and their party reach the castle. The knight is reunited with his wife. They all have a final dinner, and Death arrives to take them all away. Josh, the actor who has made good his family's escape, tells his wife that he sees Death leading the knight and his friends away, holding hands and dancing gracefully in the rain, which washes their tears away. Most of the characters in the Seventh Seal respond to the dilemma of God's existence and of meaning in the world with varied philosophies. Belief and unbelief are explored in all their aspects in simple scenes that are transporting or terrifying, but always incredibly layered with deep philosophical concepts. Bergman never settles the question of God for the audience or for the knight. Block asks Death in the confessional, "Is it so cruelly inconceivable to grasp God with the senses? Why should he hide himself in a mist of half-spoken promises and unseen miracles?" Death does not answer. The viewer might attempt an answer, that the God the knight seeks so desperately is not there and does not exist. The Wizard of Oz, director Victor Fleming, 1939. The Wizard of Oz is nearly always included in critic and viewer lists of top 10 films of all time. The film can be interpreted as a secular statement that there is no master wizard or God behind the curtain to direct us. Some of the plot elements foreshadow the ending's pointed reference to the illusionary nature of our belief in a wise wizard or supernatural being that can take care of us and give us what we lack. A little girl, Judy Garland, runs away from her home in Kansas when her dog bites a neighbor. The neighbor then insists that the dog Toto must be put to sleep. A tornado sweeps away the child and the dog. They land in a strange village in the land of the Munchkins, but their falling house has killed the Wicked Witch of the East. Dorothy is given the dead witch's magic red slippers by the good witch Gilda. The dead witch's sister, the Wicked Witch of the West, comes in and claims the ruby slippers, but Gilda reminds her she has no power in Munchkin land. Vowing revenge, the Wicked Witch leaves. When Dorothy asks how to go home, she is told she must find the powerful Wizard of Oz. On her way to Emerald City on the yellow brick road, Dorothy meets the Scarecrow, who needs a brain, the Tin Man, who lacks a heart, and a cowardly lion who needs courage. They set out to find the Wizard of Oz, whom they believe will provide them all with what they lack. On the way to the wizard, all three of Dorothy's friends demonstrate that they have acquired the traits that each one needs, but they still believe that the wizard must grant these gifts to them. They finally find the wizard. He has a disembodied head surrounded by smoke and flames and has a frightening, booming voice. They fight the Wicked Witch for him and win. The group returns to the wizard to claim the rewards, but Toto pulls a curtain back and the wizard is revealed to be an ordinary man speaking into a microphone in a booth with wheels and levers. Dorothy and Toto return home on their own. She wakes up in bed surrounded by her loved ones. But the morals of the story are what is most interesting to the secular viewer. The first theme of the film is that there is no powerful being to give us what we want. The second thematic insight is that what we need is within our power to achieve by our own efforts. Atheist personal narratives. I have read each one of the personal narratives. The personal narrative or autobiography is one of the most popular genres of literature in the present day. Most critics and writers of personal narrative are agreed that there are several reasons for this genre's prevalence. Jill Carr Conway thinks that people are familiarized with revealing stories of the most personal kind, either by narrating their own experiences or hearing other people's through books, television, or film. The most intimate details of many people's lives are open to assessment and interest. Another reason for the rise of the autobiography is that people no longer read fiction for the same reasons they did at one time. They once turned to fiction for instruction and reflection concerning life. Many no longer find literary fiction realistic or relevant, and they do not turn to it for direction in life. Many people do not seek out the great philosophical or psychological writers for the purpose of instruction any longer. Readers today often turn to the personal narrative to begin a reflection on their own life experiences. Jill Kerr Conway has a very salient theory that the interior spiritual journey of St. Augustine's Confessions, 397 to 8 CE, originally based on the Greek epic's hero's outward journey, gradually through the centuries turned to the secular man's journey of finding and building his place in society. Women's journeys were often interior, as when the medieval nuns found God through religious experience, and later when the secular woman's journey ended by finding the man she loved. Much of the personal narrative genre has altered. The autobiographies recommended in the book list below have some resonance with St. Augustine's Confessions. But as Augustine journeyed from paganism and heresy to the spiritual conversion of Christianity, modern atheists describe their intellectual and emotional breakthroughs from religious belief to the rationalism of non-belief. Atheists will identify and reflect on their own life experiences by reading such honest and deep accounts of the various difficulties these brave and intelligent narrators encountered on their way to atheism. The following books have been chosen for their merit by critics and readers. Hirsi Ali, Infidel, New York, Free Press, 2007. The life story of Hirsi Ali, now living in the United States, is a welcome departure from the traditional woman's narrative. In the classic tradition, the woman's narrative ended when she found her romantic hero. Her story and life were finished when she married the man she loved. Hirsi Ali's story is not yet complete, and her love is intellectual enlightenment and freedom. Born in Somalia to a strict family and Muslim clan, Infidel is the story of Hirsi Ali's long and painful struggle to gain education and independence. Having achieved both goals, she found herself forced to speak out against Islam, putting herself in danger of her life and under police protection. In her 20s, she fell under the spell of an Islamic cleric and became more religious. For a while, she was even with the Muslim Brotherhood. In 1992, she left the husband she had been ordered to marry and finally found a home in the Netherlands. She went to school and achieved a master's degree in political science. For a time, she was a member of parliament. In 2004, she and Theo Van Gogh made Submission 1, a film about the maltreatment of Muslim women under Islam. Van Gogh was murdered 2 months later by a fanatic Muslim. He shot Van Gogh, then cut his throat and stabbed him. The fanatic left a note on Van Gogh's dead body that contained serious threats to Hirsi Ali's life. She decided to move to America as conflicts over her safe house and Dutch citizenship erupted. She had previously pressured Holland to keep statistics on honor killing in Holland, and many such murders were found to be taking place. She was an outspoken critic of the practice of allowing a separate Muslim cultural and religious institution in Holland. Hirsi Ali speaks movingly and often ironically of the events in her life. She does not dramatize. This brave woman's book ends with Ali's embrace of freedom and rationality. Dan Barker, Losing Faith in Faith, From Preacher to Atheist, 1992. Losing Faith is the story of Dan Barker, a co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. See Atheist Activism. The book is an account of his long deconversion from Christian evangelical pastor to atheist. For 19 years, Barker labored as a soul saver for Christianity, as well as writing and publishing popular Christian music. Doubts concerning his belief system increasingly assailed him, and he describes the pain and intellectual conflict of losing belief in God. Many critics and readers put Losing Faith on their top 10 lists of atheist books. In addition to being a moving personal narrative of becoming an atheist, Mr. Barker's volume is a very sophisticated rebuttal of many complex arguments for the existence of God. Barker writes eloquently about the separation of church and state. Dan Barker's shared journey has been an encouragement and a spur to many atheists, and it will continue to be one for many people assailed by doubts concerning religion and also for many recent deconverts. Atheism has never looked better, saner, and happier than in Mr. Barker's lucid, accessible prose. John Loftus, Why I Became an Atheist. A former preacher rejects Christianity. John Loftus writes an honest and moving account of his deconversion from minister to atheist. He is a former minister and Christian apologist who left religion behind in the 90s. Loftus is writing why, not merely for people who are non-believers, but specifically for Christians. He challenges them to take a skeptical stance and examine their religion and belief system as an outsider would. If their belief can hold up under the intense scrutiny he prescribes, then his Christian readers are entitled to their faith. They must not fall back on the Bible or faith answers, but try to rationally explain what their religion maintains is true. If their faith does not still exist after such a difficult test, Loftus suggests that the God of your faith is not worthy of being worshipped. Atheists will find Why a rewarding volume. John Loftus is a well-read and sincere writer and thinker. Many of the arguments against the existence of God are presented in this volume in an honest, non-condescending, and accessible style. Why has excellent endnotes and an extensive bibliography. One hopes a few brave Christians will take up John Loftus's challenge. Bertrand Russell, Why I'm Not a Christian and Other Essays on Religion and Related Subjects, 1957. Russell's essays concerning religion are not only convincing, but a pure pleasure to read. Russell was one of the modern world's most esteemed philosophers and mathematicians, yet his essays and speeches are not merely accessible to non-professionals, but inspiring and worthwhile reading. His first essay, Why I'm Not a Christian, defines basic beliefs a Christian must hold to be called one: belief in God, in immortality, and in Christ. Russell proceeds to lightly and humorously, rather like brushing off an annoying fly, demolish the basic arguments for the existence of God. He disposes of the moral arguments, the justice remedying arguments, questions of the moral character of Christ, and describes the moral difficulties inherent in religion. He warns against the promotion of fear and retardation of progress from church power. Russell advises making the best we can of the world. He maintains that what we need rather than faith is knowledge, kindness, and courage. Russell disagrees with the argument that the church has made contributions to civilization. He does not believe such contributions are balanced out by the prolonged misery, superstition, wickedness, and other egregious practices that institution has perpetuated over the centuries. Russell's essays on Thomas Paine, life in the Middle Ages, and a free man's worship are inimitable. One of the most inspiring pieces of the book is titled What I Believe. In this essay, Russell argues for the good life. He hopes for a future world based on knowledge, love, and benevolence. He recommends bringing children up without superstition and creating favorable social conditions for all people. What I Believe is an essential essay for any atheist who embraces humanism to any degree. It is bracing, inspiring, and filled with hope in the middle and muddle of our human darkness. And with that, our lecture on atheist books, films, and art ends. Thank you for your patience. I am looking forward to our discussion.